The moment a woman begins to pull away from you, most men make the same mistake. They chase harder. And ironically, that's the exact moment they begin losing her for good. Let me tell you something most men were never taught about attraction. When a woman distances herself from you, the situation is rarely about what you think it's about. Men assume it's because they didn't do enough, didn't text enough, didn't show enough care, didn't fight hard enough to keep her attention. So they start doing more messages, more explanations, more emotional chasing, and every single one of those actions quietly lowers their value in her eyes. I want you to understand something about female psychology that many men misunderstand. Attraction is not sustained by pressure. It is sustained by emotional tension. The moment you remove mystery, the moment you remove uncertainty, the moment she knows she has your full emotional availability without effort, the dynamic begins to shift. And distance often begins there. Now listen carefully, because this part matters more than anything else. When a woman starts ignoring you or becoming distant, your instincts will scream at you to close that gap immediately. Your mind will tell you that silence means danger. Your anxiety will push you to reach out again and again just to feel reassurance. But women don't experience attraction through reassurance the same way men experience comfort. For many women, attraction is tied to emotional curiosity. They feel drawn toward a man when there is something about him they cannot fully predict. When a man remains grounded, calm, and slightly out of reach emotionally, he activates a natural curiosity inside her mind. But when a man becomes reactive, when he begins chasing attention, when he becomes overly available, the psychological tension disappears. And tension is the fuel of attraction. This is why distance from a woman is not automatically rejection. In many cases, it's simply a shift in emotional energy. Sometimes she is testing how you respond to uncertainty. Sometimes she is subconsciously evaluating whether you remain centered when things feel unstable. Sometimes she simply needs space to recalibrate her own feelings, but what matters most is your response. Men who lose women in these moments usually respond emotionally. They double text. They send long paragraphs explaining how much they care. They ask if something is wrong. They start seeking reassurance from the very person who created the uncertainty, and that dynamic flips the attraction completely. Because now the woman is no longer chasing emotional excitement, she is managing emotional pressure. And pressure suffocates attraction faster than almost anything else. The men who keep a woman's interest alive during distance are the men who do something that feels incredibly difficult in the moment. They step back, not as a manipulation tactic, not as a game, but as a display of emotional stability. Think about it this way. If someone pulls slightly away from you and your immediate reaction is panic, what does that communicate about your emotional state? It signals dependency. But when someone pulls away and you remain calm, grounded, and focused on your own life, it sends a completely different psychological signal. It tells her you are not controlled by her attention. And strangely enough, that is often the very thing that brings her curiosity back. Women are deeply sensitive to emotional energy. They notice when a man is centered within himself versus when he is orbiting around them. And when you stop orbiting, when you quietly return to your own direction in life, something subtle happens. The space you allow becomes the very space where attraction can breathe again. Most men never allow that space to exist. They rush to fill every silence, every gap, every moment of distance. But sometimes silence is not the end of the connection. Sometimes it's the moment where the real dynamic reveals itself. And the men who understand how to move in that silence are the men who completely change the way women see them. When a woman distances herself from you, the silence can feel unbearable. Your mind starts creating stories. Maybe she's losing interest. Maybe there's someone else. Maybe you said something wrong. The human brain hates uncertainty, and in relationships, that uncertainty can feel like emotional chaos. But here is what most men fail to realize. The real test during distance is not about winning her back. It is about revealing who you are when attention disappears. Many men build their emotional stability around a woman's validation. When she texts, they feel confident. When she shows interest, they feel powerful. When she compliments them, they feel secure. But when she withdraws, that confidence collapses, and that collapse is visible. Women are incredibly perceptive when it comes to emotional shifts. They may not analyze it logically, but they feel it instinctively. When a man becomes anxious, needy, or overly reactive during distance, it subtly communicates that his emotional center is dependent on her presence. And dependency quietly erodes attraction. Now let me show you the psychological shift that changes everything. Instead of viewing her distance as something you must fix, you begin viewing it as information. Distance reveals dynamics that attention often hides. It shows you whether she values your presence enough to reconnect. It shows whether her interest was based on genuine curiosity or simply convenience. And most importantly, it shows whether you are capable of maintaining your own emotional direction without external validation. Men who understand this stop chasing explanations. They stop trying to decode every small change in behavior. They return to the life that made them attractive in the first place. Your purpose, your ambitions, your physical discipline, your friendships, your personal growth. These things are not just background details in your life. They are the foundation of your identity. When a woman sees that her distance does not destabilize you, something powerful happens in her perception of you. You become emotionally solid, and emotional solidity is rare. Think about how many men respond to distance by overreacting. Messages like, "Did I do something wrong?" or "Why are you ignoring me?" or "Are you still interested?" appear quickly. These questions may seem harmless, but psychologically, they shift the dynamic. They position her as the emotional authority in the connection. Now she is responsible for calming your uncertainty. And attraction does not grow inside responsibility. Attraction grows inside curiosity. So what does emotional strength look like in this moment? It looks like composure. It looks like patience. It looks like continuing to live your life with the same confidence you had before her attention became part of it. When you maintain that energy, the silence starts working differently. Instead of chasing her attention, you allow her to experience your absence. And absence has psychological weight. People rarely realize the value of something when it is constantly available. But when presence becomes limited, the mind begins to reassess its importance. Suddenly, she notices you are not reacting the way most men react. You are not demanding reassurance. You are not flooding her phone. You are not trying to force emotional closeness. You simply continue moving forward. And that shift introduces something that reignites attraction: respect. Respect is often more powerful than affection in the early stages of connection. A woman may enjoy attention from many men, but she rarely respects the ones who lose themselves in pursuit of her validation. The man who maintains his center during distance communicates something very rare. He communicates self-possession, and self-possession changes the emotional gravity of the interaction, because now she begins to wonder something she wasn't wondering before. Why isn't he chasing me like everyone else? Curiosity begins there, and curiosity is where attraction quietly begins to rebuild. There is a quiet psychological law operating in every relationship, but very few men are ever taught to recognize it. The more emotionally available you make yourself without challenge, the less valuable that availability becomes. It's not because women are cruel, it's because the human mind adapts quickly to certainty. When someone knows they can access your attention whenever they want, your presence becomes predictable. And predictable attention rarely sparks emotional excitement. This is why distance from a woman often exposes a deeper imbalance in the dynamic. Sometimes she hasn't lost interest completely. Sometimes she simply stopped feeling the emotional spark that originally drew her toward you, and that spark almost always disappears when a man begins prioritizing her attention above his own purpose. You might not even realize when it happens. At first, you're busy with your life. You have goals, routines, ambitions. She becomes part of that world and enjoys being included in it. But slowly, almost invisibly, the focus begins to shift. Your schedule starts adjusting around her availability. Your attention becomes more concentrated on keeping the connection alive. And suddenly, she is no longer joining your life. Your life is orbiting around her. Women rarely say this out loud, but they feel it immediately. The moment a man begins structuring his emotional world around them, the dynamic changes. Instead of feeling drawn toward his direction, they begin feeling like the center of it. And strangely enough, that removes the excitement. Attraction thrives when a woman feels she is stepping into a man's world, not when she feels that world shrinking to revolve around her. So when she distances herself, something important is happening beneath the surface. Her emotional instincts are recalibrating the dynamic. She is unconsciously asking a question most men never realize is being asked. Does this man still have a life that moves independently of me? Your response answers that question. If you panic and chase her attention, you confirm the imbalance. But if you return to your own direction with quiet confidence, something changes inside her perception. She begins seeing you again as the man she originally noticed. The man who had momentum. The man who had focus. The man who wasn't defined by whether or not she texted back that day. Momentum is deeply attractive energy. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who are moving somewhere in life. It signals ambition, stability, and emotional independence. And when a woman senses that momentum again, her curiosity often returns, not because you demanded it, but because you restored the dynamic that created attraction in the first place. This is why the most powerful response to distance is not emotional reaction. It is quiet redirection. You invest your energy back into growth, into your health, into your work, into the goals that existed before she entered your world. And here is the fascinating psychological effect that follows. When a woman notices that your life continues expanding without her constant involvement, she begins experiencing a subtle shift in emotional perspective. Instead of feeling like she holds the center of your attention, she begins feeling like she might lose access to it. Scarcity creates value. It doesn't mean ignoring her or playing manipulative games. It simply means your life remains larger than the relationship itself. And when that becomes clear, the emotional gravity shifts again. She no longer feels like the sun in your universe. She becomes someone invited into it, and invitations are far more attractive than dependence. Now, here is the truth most men discover too late. When a woman distances herself, the moment is not really about her behavior. It is about the identity you reveal in response to that behavior. Anyone can appear confident when things are going well. When the messages are frequent, the attention is mutual, and the energy feels exciting, confidence comes naturally. But real emotional strength appears when certainty disappears. Distance exposes whether a man is anchored in his own life or drifting inside someone else's attention, and women notice that difference immediately. A man who is anchored does something very simple when distance appears. He accepts it without drama. He doesn't interpret it as an emergency. He doesn't rush to force clarity. He simply allows the situation to unfold while continuing to invest in the direction of his own life. That calmness is incredibly powerful because it communicates something deeper than words ever could. It communicates self-respect. Self-respect is magnetic. It tells the world that your identity is not dependent on someone choosing you. Instead, your identity comes from the standards you maintain for your own life. And when a woman senses that energy, it creates a different emotional atmosphere around you. Instead of feeling like you need her attention to feel complete, she begins feeling that your presence is something she must choose to be part of. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Now, here is something important to understand. Sometimes distance means she truly is losing interest, and that reality is difficult for many men to accept. But the way you respond in that moment determines whether you lose more than just the connection. If you chase someone who is pulling away, you lose your dignity along with the relationship. But if you remain grounded and let the situation reveal itself, you keep the most valuable thing you have, your self-respect. Ironically, self-respect is also the quality most likely to restore attraction if any interest still exists. Because confidence without arrogance, patience without desperation, and strength without emotional chaos create an energy that very few people possess. It shows that your life has direction, and people are naturally drawn toward direction. This is why the most powerful action when a woman distances herself is not something dramatic, it's something quiet. You stop chasing clarity and start living with clarity. You move forward, you build, you grow. You focus on becoming the kind of man whose value is not measured by how quickly someone responds to his messages. And here is the paradox most men eventually realize. The moment you stop needing someone's attention is often the moment they start noticing you again, because emotional independence is rare, and rarity attracts curiosity. So the next time a woman pulls away or becomes distant, remember this simple principle. Do not chase her attention. Return to your own momentum. Let your life speak louder than your anxiety ever could. Now I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever chased someone who was clearly pulling away and later realized that chasing only pushed them further? Or have you experienced the opposite, where you stepped back, focused on your life, and suddenly they became curious about you again? Write your experience in the comments. Your story might help another man understand this dynamic. And if this message gave you a new perspective on attraction and self-respect, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this before he makes the same mistake most men make.